I'm going to get married. The janitor accepts the billionaire doctor and she trembles for his yes. The surgical lights dimmed as Celeste Davenport stripped off her bloodied gloves. Another life saved. Another night spent in the cold embrace of operating rooms instead of human arms. At 24, she owned the Melbrook hospital empire her father had built, commanded respect from surgeons twice her age, and returned each night to a mansion that echoed with expensive emptiness. Excellent work, Dr. Davenport, her chief resident murmured, but she barely heard him. The compliments had lost their warmth years ago, becoming mere background noise to the persistent ache of loneliness that no amount of professional success could cure. She walked through the hospital corridors at 2 a.m., her royal blue blazer perfectly tailored over denim shorts, an outfit that made the board members whisper, but which she wore as armor against their judgment. Her tanned skin glowed under the harsh lights, blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, blue eyes ringed with the exhaustion of someone who worked herself to death to avoid feeling alive. The hallway on the executive floor was empty, except for the soft sound of water swishing in a bucket. She almost walked past without looking, but something made her stop. A man in a blue janitor's uniform knelt by her office door, yellow gloves bright against the white tiles, scrubbing with methodical precision that spoke of dignity rather than servitude. He looked up and the world tilted. Blue eyes met blue eyes. For a moment that stretched into infinity, neither moved. His face was weathered by sun and struggle, probably 28 or 29, with the kind of rugged handsomeness that came from real life rather than genetic lottery. Something about the set of his jaw, the way he held himself despite the menial work, struck a chord deep in her memory. "Working late," he said, his voice rough silk, a statement rather than a question. "Someone has to keep this place running." She meant it as dismissal, but it came out vulnerable, exposing the truth she never spoke. She had nowhere else to go. He returned to his work, but she found herself rooted to the spot, watching the competent movements of his hands. Those weren't the hands of someone who'd always pushed a mop. They moved with the confidence of someone who'd once commanded different tools, made different decisions. "You're new here," she said, and immediately regretted the observation. CEOs didn't make small talk with janitors, but she wasn't just a CEO. She was a woman who'd forgotten how to connect with anyone real. Started 3 weeks ago. He stood, towering over her 5'6" frame despite her heels. "Ryan Walker, Celeste Davenport. I know who you are, Dr. Davenport. Your name's on the building." There was no resentment in his voice, just fact. She liked that. She was so tired of people who fawned or envied, never treating her like a person beneath the title. "Well, Ryan Walker, thank you for keeping my hospital clean. It's a good hospital, better than most I've seen." He picked up his bucket. "You should go home, Dr. Davenport. Even surgeons need sleep." The concern in his voice, simple and genuine, hit her harder than any declaration from the men who'd pursued her wealth. When was the last time someone had cared about her well-being rather than her bank account? "And what about janitors?" she asked softly. "We rest when the work's done." He nodded respectfully and moved down the hallway, leaving her standing alone with an unfamiliar warmth spreading through her chest. Over the following weeks, Celeste found herself timing her late-night rounds to coincide with his shifts. She told herself it was coincidence that she simply worked late and he happened to be there. But the truth was, Ryan Walker had become the most interesting part of her days. Their conversations started simply: weather, hospital gossip, the minor dramas of their different worlds. But gradually they deepened into something neither had anticipated. He talked about philosophy like a man who'd spent considerable time thinking about life's meaning. She found herself sharing frustrations she'd never voiced to her wealthy friends who couldn't understand loneliness in a mansion. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" she asked one night, finding him in the break room at 3 a.m. She wore her signature royal blue blazer and denim shorts, having given up pretending she didn't seek these moments. Ryan looked up from the coffee he was making. Real coffee, not the sludge from the machine. He'd brought his own beans, she noticed, and a small French press. Every day, he admitted. But then I remember, this life, whatever it looks like to others, it's mine. I chose it. Did you? Choose it? He poured coffee into 2 cups without asking if she wanted one. She accepted it gratefully, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The touch sent electricity through her arm. I chose it after the alternative became impossible, he said carefully. Sometimes the path forward is the only one left when all the bridges behind you burn. She wanted to ask what bridges had burned, but something in his expression warned her off. Instead, she sipped the coffee, perfect strong, made with care, and let the silence speak what words couldn't. I inherited this hospital when my father died 2 years ago, she heard herself say. Everyone thinks I'm lucky. 22 years old and a billionaire. They don't see that I'd trade it all for one more conversation with him, or that every decision I make is shadowed by his ghost, or that I come home to a house so big I can scream and no one hears. Ryan set down his cup and looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Lucky isn't the same as happy, he said. Took me 30 years to figure that out. You're ahead of schedule. You're not 30, she said automatically. 28, but I've lived several lifetimes in those years. He smiled, and it transformed his face from handsome to devastating. Some of them I'd rather forget. And others? Others I'm still trying to remember. The cryptic response should have frustrated her, but instead it intrigued her more. Ryan Walker was a puzzle wrapped in a janitor's uniform, and she found herself wanting to solve him. Their friendship, if that's what it was, continued to deepen through stolen moments in empty corridors and break rooms. Celeste learned that Ryan rode a blue Harley-Davidson to work, that he loved the freedom of the road more than almost anything, that he was reading Seneca's letters and had opinions on Stoic philosophy that challenged her own understanding. You're not what I expected in a janitor, she said one night, then immediately winced at how condescending it sounded. But Ryan just laughed, a sound that rumbled through his chest like distant thunder. And you're not what I expected in a billionaire heiress. Guess we're both full of surprises. What did you do before this? The question had burned in her for weeks. His expression shuddered slightly. I was a financial trader, worked at some of the biggest firms in New York, got accepted to manage capital for BlackRock. She stared at him, coffee forgotten in her hand. BlackRock? That's Ryan. That's one of the most prestigious positions in finance. What happened? Life happened. Loss happened. I learned that making millions for other people's portfolios doesn't mean much when you lose what actually matters. He stood abruptly, gathering his cleaning supplies. Some bridges burn, Dr. Davenport, and you walk away from the ashes or you burn with them. She wanted to push, to demand the full story, but something in his pain-shadowed eyes stopped her. Instead, she did something she'd never done before. She reached out and touched his arm. I'm sorry for whatever you lost. He looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face, and something shifted between them. The air grew thick with possibility, with danger, with the kind of connection that could change everything. Thank you, he said quietly. Then he left, leaving her alone with a racing heart, and questions that multiplied instead of diminished. The next time she saw him, he was outside in the hospital parking lot at dawn, working on his Harley-Davidson. She'd pulled an all-night shift, and was heading to her Mercedes when the sight of him stopped her in her tracks. He'd removed his uniform shirt, working in a white undershirt that showed arms corded with muscle, hands moving over the motorcycle with the same confident precision he brought to everything. The Harley was beautiful, a deep, gleaming blue that caught the rising sun. He had the engine exposed, tools arranged with military precision around him. Problem with the bike? She called out, surprising herself. He looked up and she saw the way his gaze traveled over her, not lewdly, but with appreciation that made her feel seen rather than examined. She was still in her royal blue blazer and denim shorts, looking more like she was heading to a beach than leaving a hospital shift. Just routine maintenance. This bike and I have been through hell together. I owe her the best care I can give. Celeste walked closer, drawn by the reverence in his voice. Her? Every great bike is a she, he said with a smile. Temperamental, beautiful, loyal when you treat her right. Sounds like you're describing a woman. Maybe I'm describing the only kind of relationship I trust anymore. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and raw. Celeste crouched down beside him, her expensive shoes touching the oil-stained concrete, and looked at the motorcycle like it might reveal Ryan's secrets. Teach me, she said impulsively. Teach you what? About the bike. About motorcycles. I've spent my whole life in luxury cars with hired drivers. Show me what freedom feels like. Ryan studied her for a long moment and she held her breath. suddenly desperate for him to say yes. Freedom isn't something you can teach, Dr. Davenport, it's something you claim. Then help me claim it. He wiped his hands on a rag, considering. You free Sunday morning? I can be. Meet me here at sunrise. Wear jeans and boots, not those designer heels. And Celeste? He used her first name for the first time, and it sent a shiver down her spine. Don't tell anyone. Some lessons are better learned in secret. She agreed, though she didn't fully understand why the secrecy mattered. All she knew was that Sunday suddenly felt impossibly far away. The days until Sunday crawled by with agonizing slowness. Celeste performed surgeries, attended board meetings, made decisions that affected hundreds of employees, but her mind kept drifting to blue eyes and a blue Harley, and the promise of freedom she didn't fully understand. She showed up Sunday at 5:30 a.m., wearing jeans that felt foreign after years of designer clothes, and boots she'd bought specifically for this. Ryan was already there, the motorcycle gleaming beside him, wearing worn jeans and a leather jacket that made him look dangerous and completely devastatingly attractive. Ready? He asked. I don't know. Am I? He held out a helmet. Only one way to find out. She took it, her hands trembling slightly. I've never been on a motorcycle. I know. That's why you're going to hold on tight and trust me. Trust. Such a simple word, but it required everything from her. Celeste had learned young that trusting people often led to disappointment. Her mother had died when she was 10. Her father had worked himself to death. Her ex-husband had wanted her money more than her heart. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, but something about Ryan made her want to try again. She climbed on behind him, her arms awkward around his waist until he pulled them tighter, his voice warm against her ear. Like you mean it, Celeste. I'm not going to let you fall. The engine roared to life, vibrating through her entire body, and then they were moving. The hospital parking lot gave way to empty roads, the city still sleeping around them, and Celeste felt something inside her chest crack open. The wind tore at her hair beneath the helmet. The sun painted the sky in oranges and pinks, and pressed against Ryan's solid back, she finally understood what freedom meant. It wasn't about money or power or control. It was about letting go, about trusting someone enough to close your eyes and just feel. They rode for 2 hours, taking back roads along the coast, stopping at a deserted beach where the waves crashed against ancient rocks. Ryan killed the engine and they sat in silence, watching the ocean, and Celeste realized she was crying. Hey, he said softly, turning to look at her with concern. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, she said, laughing through her tears. That's the problem. I can't remember the last time nothing was wrong. He reached out and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb, the gesture so tender it made her heart ache. You carry a lot of weight, Celeste Davenport. Sometimes it's okay to set it down. I don't know how. You just did. For 2 hours, you weren't Dr. Davenport or the hospital CEO or a billionaire heiress. You were just Celeste, holding on and feeling the wind. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw past the janitor's uniform and the defensive walls and the pain he carried. She saw a man who'd lost something precious and rebuilt himself from the ashes. She saw someone who understood her in ways no one else ever had. Who are you really, Ryan Walker? I'm a man who makes mistakes, learns slowly, and rides a motorcycle because it's the only time I feel like myself. He paused. And right now, I'm a man who's terrified because I'm starting to care about someone I have no business caring about. Her breath caught. Why no business? Because you're you and I'm me, and the world doesn't work that way. Rich girls don't fall for janitors except in movies, and even then it usually ends badly. I'm not a girl. I'm a 24-year-old woman who's tired of living according to other people's scripts. She turned to face him fully on the motorcycle seat. And maybe I want to write a different story. Celeste, do you like music, Ryan? The question, seemingly random, made him blink in confusion. What? Music. Do you like it? Because I put music at the beginning of all my videos. The recordings I make to myself when I can't sleep, talking about my day, trying to make sense of this life. And I always wonder if anyone actually listens to the music or if they skip ahead to the talking. He smiled at the strange vulnerability in her admission. I listen to the music first. It tells you about the person before their words do. What would my music tell you? That you're lonely, that you're strong but tired of being strong, that you want someone to see past the armor to the woman underneath. He reached out and tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, and that you're scared of what happens when someone actually does. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the truth of his words settling over her like a revelation. I see you, he whispered. God help me, I see you, Celeste. And then, there on a deserted beach with the sunrise painting the sky and the ocean singing its ancient song, Ryan Walker leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a tentative kiss or a gentle exploration. It was a claim, a surrender, a declaration that some forces couldn't be denied no matter how illogical they seemed. Celeste kissed him back with all the loneliness and longing and desperate hope she'd been carrying, and for the first time in years she felt truly alive. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ryan rested his forehead against hers. "This is insane," he said. "Completely," she agreed. "Your board will lose their minds. Society will have a field day. And He stopped, pain flickering across his face. "I come with baggage, Celeste. The kind that doesn't just go away. I don't care about the board or society or baggage, I care about this." She pressed her hand over his heart, feeling it thunder beneath her palm. "I care about feeling something real for the first time since I can remember. Don't you dare take that away from me out of some misguided nobility." He caught her hand, held it against his chest, and looked at her with such raw emotion that she felt tears prick her eyes again. "You don't know what you're asking for. Then show me. Teach me. Let me in, Ryan." For a long moment he struggled with himself, and she could see the war between his pride and his desire, between his fear and his hope. Finally, he exhaled slowly. "Okay, but we do this right. No hiding like we're ashamed. No pretending it's just physical. If we're doing this, Celeste, we're doing it honestly. I can do honest. Can you? Because honest means you'll have to face questions you don't want to answer. It means I'll have to tell you things I've never told anyone. It means we both risk everything with no guarantee of anything. I'm a surgeon, Ryan. I take risks every day with lives hanging in the balance. I think I can handle a relationship." He smiled at that. A real smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger, less burdened. "A relationship? Is that what we're calling this? What would you call it? Terrifying, unexpected, possibly the best mistake I've ever made." She kissed him again, softer this time, sweeter, and tasted hope on his lips. They rode back to the hospital as the city woke around them, but everything had changed. Celeste felt like she was seeing the world in color after years of grayscale. Every sensation heightened, every moment precious. Ryan parked the Harley in his usual spot, and they sat there for a moment, reality creeping back in with the morning traffic sounds. "People are going to talk," she said quietly. "Let them. The board might—" "Celeste." He turned to face her. "I've lost everything once before. Lost it so completely I had to rebuild myself from nothing. You think I'm afraid of a board of directors? What did you lose?" His expression darkened and she immediately regretted pushing. But after a moment he spoke, his voice rough with old pain. "My daughter." The words hit her like a physical blow. "Ryan. Car accident. She was 7. My wife was driving. They were going to pick me up from the office. I was working late on a deal, always working late, and a drunk driver ran a red light." His hands clenched on the motorcycle handles. "My wife died instantly. My little girl lived for 3 days. 3 days where I sat beside her hospital bed and bargained with God and made promises I knew I couldn't keep if only he'd let her stay." Tears streamed down Celeste's face. "I'm so sorry. I was a trader for BlackRock, managing billions, and I couldn't do a damn thing to save what actually mattered. So after the funerals, after the lawsuits, after the life insurance paid out, I gave all the money away and walked away from that life. I couldn't be that person anymore. The one who chose spreadsheets over bedtime stories, who thought success meant a bigger portfolio instead of more time with the people you love. That's why you're a janitor. I'm a janitor because it's honest work that ends when the shift ends, because I can do it without thinking, which leaves my mind free to remember her laugh and the way she called me daddy, and all the moments I missed because I was too busy building an empire that meant nothing when she was gone." He looked at Celeste with devastating honesty. "I'm a janitor because I don't deserve to be anything more. That's not true, isn't it? I put work before family and my family died. That's not metaphor, Celeste, that's consequence." She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but she understood guilt too intimately to dismiss his. Instead, she took his face in her hands and made him look at her. "You're allowed to live, Ryan. You're allowed to be happy again. Your daughter wouldn't want you punishing yourself forever. You don't know what she'd want. She doesn't get to want anything anymore. I know what my mother wanted. Before she died, cancer. It took 18 months. She made me promise I'd live fully, love deeply, and never let fear stop me from taking chances. She said regret was worse than failure, that playing it safe was just another way of dying slowly." Ryan's eyes searched hers, looking for judgment or pity but finding only understanding. "Your mother sounds like she was wise." "She was. And she'd have liked you, the real you, not the armor you wear." Celeste paused. "I like you, Ryan. All of you, including the broken parts and the guilt and the fear. I'm not asking you to forget or to stop grieving. I'm just asking you to consider that maybe, Possibly. You could also let yourself feel something good again. He kissed her then, slow and deep and achingly tender, and she felt him surrender some of the weight he'd been carrying. You make it sound possible, he whispered against her lips. That's because it is. Over the following weeks, they navigated the complicated territory of their new relationship. Celeste made the first public move, inviting Ryan to a hospital charity gala as her guest instead of hiding him away like a guilty secret. The invitation raised eyebrows, generated whispers, and made several board members request emergency meetings. She ignored them all. Ryan showed up in a borrowed suit that couldn't hide his rough edges, and she wore a royal blue gown that matched her signature blazer, her blonde hair styled elegantly, diamonds at her throat, all the armor of wealth and position. But when she took his arm and walked into that ballroom, she felt more like herself than she ever had in designer clothes. You sure about this? He murmured as cameras flashed and conversations stopped. Completely terrified, she admitted, but also completely sure. The evening was predictably terrible and wonderfully perfect. Society matrons gave them scandalized looks. Business rivals saw weakness to exploit. But through it all, Ryan remained steady beside her, not intimidated by the wealth, not impressed by the status, just there, solid and real. During the dancing, when she was in his arms and the orchestra played something slow and romantic, he leaned down to whisper, "Hello, my friend. How was your day today? Is everything okay?" The phrase was so unexpected, so at odds with the formal setting, that she laughed out loud. My day? It was surreal and strange, and I spent most of it defending my choice in date to people whose opinions shouldn't matter but somehow still do. She looked up at him. Is everything okay? That's a bigger question. Then give me a bigger answer. Everything's terrifying and uncertain and completely unlike anything I planned for my life. And yes, Ryan, everything is absolutely okay. He smiled and pulled her closer and let the gossips gossip. For the first time in her carefully controlled life, Celeste didn't care what anyone thought. But not everyone accepted their relationship with idle gossip. 2 weeks after the gala, the board of directors called an emergency meeting. Celeste walked into the conference room to find 12 stern faces and one agenda item, her inappropriate relationship with hospital staff. Dr. Davenport, the chairman began, his voice dripping with false concern. We're worried about appearances. The hospital has a reputation to maintain. And I'm maintaining it by doing excellent work as both a surgeon and CEO. My personal life is irrelevant. When you're the face of this institution, nothing is irrelevant. Another board member interjected. This man, Walker, he's a janitor. Do you understand how this looks? I understand exactly how it looks. It looks like I'm dating someone who treats me like a human being rather than a bank account. It looks like I've found someone genuine in a world full of people who see dollar signs instead of people. She stood, her hands flat on the polished table. And if that threatens you, perhaps you should examine why. He could be using you. Ryan Walker turned down BlackRock. He had millions and walked away from all of it because it cost him something more valuable. Trust me when I say he's the last person on earth who wants my money. Nevertheless nothing. I own 51% of this hospital. My father left it to me in trust, and unless you can prove gross incompetence, which you can't, since I've increased our patient outcomes by 15% and our revenue by 20% since taking over, you have no grounds to question my personal choices. The room fell silent. She'd never pulled rank before, never reminded them that ultimately she held the power, but she wouldn't let them diminish what she had with Ryan or make her feel ashamed for choosing love over propriety. Now, she continued more softly, I appreciate your concern. I really do. This hospital was my father's legacy, and I take that responsibility seriously. But part of that legacy was his belief that hospitals should serve humanity, that medicine is about people, not profit margins. Ryan reminds me of that every day. So unless you want to discuss actual hospital business, this meeting is over. She walked out with her head high, but her hands were shaking. In the hallway, she found Ryan waiting, having been told about the meeting by sympathetic staff. How bad? He asked. They'll get over it or they won't. Either way, I'm done apologizing for caring about you. He pulled her into an empty office and kissed her hard. You're incredible, you know that? I'm terrified they're right, that I'm risking everything for something that might not last. Then we make it last. He held her face between his hands. I know I'm not easy, Celeste. I know I come with grief and complications and a past that still haunts me. But I promise you this, I see you, I value you. And I'll fight for what we have just as hard as you're fighting. Promise? I promise. They settled into a rhythm that defied logic, but felt right. Ryan continued working as a janitor. He refused to quit, saying the work grounded him. but spent his off hours with Celeste. They took long rides on the Harley along the coast, explored hidden beaches, talked until dawn about philosophy and loss and hope. She introduced him to her world cautiously, dinners with friends who'd known her father, gallery openings, charity events, and was surprised by how well he fit. He had a natural intelligence and curiosity that made him interesting beyond his humble job, and people responded to his authenticity. He introduced her to his world too: dive bars where construction workers drank after shifts, motorcycle rallies where everyone judged you by your bike rather than your bank account, sunrise rides where the only requirement was appreciating beauty. She learned to love the grease under her nails after helping him work on the Harley, the burn in her thighs after long rides, the simplicity of a life not measured by quarterly reports. But shadows remained. Ryan still had nightmares about the accident, waking up gasping and reaching for someone who wasn't there. Celeste held him through those nights, understanding that some wounds never fully healed, only learned to scar, and she had her own demons: the pressure of running a hospital, the weight of her father's expectations, the fear that she was failing everyone who depended on her. Ryan listened to those fears without trying to fix them, just offered his presence and understanding. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked one night as they lay on her mansion's roof, staring at stars, walking away from everything, starting over. "Every day," he admitted, "but I regret not spending more time with my daughter more." Regret is relative. I chose the lesser of two evils. That's not the same as choosing happiness. No, but maybe happiness is something we build slowly, one decision at a time, rather than something we find complete and perfect. She turned to look at him in the moonlight. "Are you building happiness with me?" "I'm trying, are you?" "Yeah," she whispered. "I really am." He kissed her softly, and she tasted hope and fear and possibility on his lips. 3 months into their relationship, something shifted. Celeste couldn't pinpoint exactly when it happened, but she woke up one morning and realized she wasn't just falling for Ryan Walker. She'd already fallen completely, irreversibly, terrifyingly in love. The revelation sent her into mild panic. Love made you vulnerable. Love gave someone power to hurt you. Love meant risking everything on something fundamentally uncertain. But as she watched him work on his Harley in her garage, his hands sure and steady, his face peaceful in a way it rarely was, she couldn't deny what she felt. This wasn't infatuation or rebellion against her privileged world. This was real, deep, the kind of love that changed your life's trajectory. "Hey," he called, noticing her watching. "You okay?" "I love you," she blurted out, and immediately wanted to take it back. Too fast, too much, too vulnerable. Ryan stood slowly, wiping his hands on a rag, his expression unreadable. "Celeste, don't tell me it's too soon or that I don't know what I'm saying or any of the reasonable things I'm already telling myself. I love you, Ryan Walker. I love your damaged pride and your stoic philosophy and the way you rebuild engines like they're puzzles. I love how you make me feel safe enough to cry and strong enough to stand up to my board. I love—" He crossed the garage in 3 strides and kissed her breathless, and when he pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I love you too," he said roughly. "God help me. I love you too, and it scares the hell out of me." "Why?" "Because loving someone gives them the power to destroy you. Because I loved my wife and daughter, and when I lost them, I wanted to stop existing. Because loving you means I have something to lose again, and I don't know if I'd survive that twice." She touched his face gently. "Life doesn't come with guarantees, Ryan. We could both die tomorrow in a car accident or live to be 90 and bore our grandchildren with stories. But if we let fear stop us from loving because we might get hurt, then fear has already won. We've already died, just slowly." "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from this janitor I know. He taught me about stoicism and motorcycles and living honestly even when it's hard." Ryan pulled her close, tucking her head under his chin, and she felt his heart racing against her cheek. "I'm still going to mess this up sometimes," he warned. "I'm going to have bad days where the grief comes back hard. I'm going to struggle with feeling worthy of you. I'm going to—" "Be human," she finished. "Same as me. We'll mess up together, and figure it out together, and love each other through it. That's the deal." "That's the deal," he agreed, and kissed the top of her head. But love, as it turned out, wasn't enough to shield them from reality. A month later, an investigative journalist decided the billionaire doctor dating her janitor was a story worth exposing. The article was brutal. It dug into Ryan's past, his tragedy, painted him as either a gold digger exploiting a lonely heiress, or a charity case she kept around for ego. It questioned his motives, her judgment. suggested the relationship was either calculated manipulation or slumming it for thrills. Celeste read it over breakfast and felt rage build in her chest. But when she looked at Ryan across the table, she saw something worse than anger. She saw shame. "Don't," she said firmly. "Don't you dare let them make you feel small. They're not wrong though, are they? What am I offering you except complications and bad publicity and love? You're offering me love, Ryan. Real, honest, transformative love. Everything else is just noise. Noise that could destroy your reputation, damage your hospital, make your life infinitely harder." He stood, began pacing her kitchen like a caged animal. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm being selfish, letting you risk so much for what? For happiness? For connection? For feeling alive instead of just existing? She stood too, blocking his path. "You don't get to decide unilaterally that this isn't worth it. I have a voice in this relationship, and I'm saying I don't care what they write or think or say. I care about you. Celeste. No, you taught me about living honestly, about having the courage to be yourself despite the cost. Don't you dare go back on those lessons now because some journalist decided our love story makes good clickbait." He looked at her for a long moment, warring with himself, and she held her breath. This was the moment. Either he believed in them enough to weather the storm, or he'd walk away to protect her from consequences she was willing to accept. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, but we fight back. Not with lawyers or press releases, with the truth. We show them who we really are together and let the chips fall where they may." "How?" "Let me think about it." 3 days later, Ryan showed up at the hospital with a proposal that took her breath away. He'd arranged with a local television station, one that owed him a favor from his trading days when he'd given them a tip that made their retirement fund millions, to do an interview. A real honest conversation about their relationship, their backgrounds, and the love they'd found in the unlikeliest of places. "You don't have to do this," Celeste said, reading through the proposed questions. They were fair, but probing, asking about his past, his loss, his current work. It would expose everything. "Yes, I do. Because loving you means standing beside you publicly, not hiding in the shadows while you take all the heat." He took her hand. "I'm done being ashamed of honest work or honest love. Let's show them what real looks like." The interview aired on a Friday evening. They sat together on a simple couch. No studio makeup or scripted responses, just two people telling their truth. The interviewer started gentle. "Dr. Davenport, you're one of the youngest hospital CEOs in the country, a respected surgeon, and a billionaire. What attracted you to Ryan?" Celeste looked at the man beside her and smiled. "He sees me. Not my bank account or my title or my father's legacy, just me. He challenges me, makes me laugh, teaches me about philosophy and motorcycles and finding peace in honest work. He's the first person in years who's made me feel like Celeste instead of Dr. Davenport. And Ryan, you worked in high finance before becoming a janitor. Some people say that's suspicious, that perhaps you have ulterior motives in this relationship." Ryan's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "I lost my wife and 7-year-old daughter in a car accident 3 years ago. I walked away from finance because money couldn't save them, and I couldn't be the man who'd chosen work over family time anymore. I'm a janitor because it's honest work that lets me sleep at night. And I love Celeste because she's brave and kind and real in a world full of pretense." The raw honesty silenced even the cynical interviewer. When the camera stopped rolling, there wasn't a dry eye in the studio. The response was overwhelming. Some people remained skeptical, but many more saw the genuine connection between them, the real grief and growth and love. The hospital board received hundreds of emails supporting Celeste. The article that had tried to destroy them became a footnote to a larger story about love transcending circumstance. But the most important response came from Ryan that night, as they sat on her mansion's patio, exhausted, but relieved. "Thank you," she said softly, "for doing that, for standing beside me. Thank you for being worth standing beside." He pulled something from his pocket, a small worn keychain shaped like a motorcycle. "I found this in your office the night we met. It must have fallen out of your desk drawer when you were looking for something. I kept meaning to return it but kept forgetting." Celeste stared at the keychain, her heart suddenly racing. "Where did you get this?" "It was on the floor by your desk. I assumed it was yours." He stopped as she started crying. "Celeste? What's wrong?" "It is mine. Was mine. I lost it 20 years ago." Her hands were shaking as she took the keychain, memories flooding back. "There was a boy I knew when I was 5 years old. We were neighbors for one summer before his family moved away. He had a little blue motorcycle keychain just like this, and I loved it so much he gave it to me. Made me promise to keep it safe and remember him. Ryan had gone very still. What was his name? I don't remember. I was so young, and after they moved, my father said it was better to forget than to miss what we couldn't have. She looked up at him through tears. But I never forgot that keychain. I carried it everywhere until I lost it in high school. And finding it now, after all this time in my office where you were cleaning. She trailed off as understanding dawned in his eyes. Show me your hand, he said hoarsely. Confused, she held out her left hand. He turned it over gently, examining her palm, and found a small scar near her thumb. You got this from falling off my bike when I tried to teach you to ride it, he whispered. You were 4. Your name was Celeste, but everyone called you Celly. Your favorite color was blue. You said it was the color of the sky where dreams lived. Ryan, his name came out broken. That was you? My family moved when my father got transferred. I was 6 years old and cried for weeks about leaving you. I gave you that keychain so you'd remember me, made you promise. His voice cracked. And then life happened. Marriage, career, my daughter, the accident, rebuilding, and I forgot the little blonde girl who'd been my first friend. Until now. Until you. They stared at each other, the weight of coincidence or fate or destiny pressing down on them both. We were connected before, she said wonderingly. The universe brought us back together. Or we found our way back to each other despite everything trying to keep us apart. He pulled her into his arms and she felt him trembling. God, Celeste. All this time I've been looking for something I couldn't name. Something that felt like home. And it was you. It's always been you. She kissed him, tasting tears, hers or his, she couldn't tell, and felt every piece of her scattered life suddenly make sense. After that revelation, something shifted between them again. What had been already deep became profound. What had been certain became unshakable. They weren't just two people who'd found love against odds. They were two souls who'd been connected across time, separated by circumstance, and brought back together when they both needed it most. Celeste found herself thinking about forever, about a future she'd stopped believing in. She imagined Ryan's motorcycle parked permanently in her garage, imagined waking up to him every morning, imagined building a life together that honored both their pasts while embracing their future. But she also knew Ryan struggled with the same thoughts. His loss had taught him that forever wasn't guaranteed, that making plans was just inviting the universe to laugh at your presumption. Christmas came, and with it, a charity event at the hospital. Celeste was scheduled to give a speech thanking donors and staff. She stood at the podium looking out at faces, some supportive, some still skeptical, and made a decision. Thank you all for coming tonight, she began. This hospital has been my family's legacy for 3 generations, and I'm proud to continue that tradition. But tonight I want to talk about a different kind of legacy, the one we create through the people we love and the courage we show in living authentically. She found Ryan in the crowd, standing near the back in his best suit, and spoke directly to him. This year I learned that success isn't measured in surgical outcomes or profit margins, though those matter. Real success is finding someone who sees you completely, your strengths and flaws, your hopes and fears, and chooses to stay anyway. It's building something true in a world full of pretense. She paused, her heart racing. I also learned that some connections transcend time and circumstance, that two people can be meant for each other even when logic says it's impossible. And I learned that the greatest act of courage isn't performing a difficult surgery or standing up to a board of directors. It's being vulnerable enough to risk your heart again after it's been broken. Ryan was staring at her now, understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. Merry Christmas to you all, she continued, speaking to the room but meaning every word for him. May you have the courage to love deeply, the wisdom to appreciate what matters, and the grace to accept the gifts life offers even when they come in unexpected packages. And may the Creator bless each of you with peace, hope, and the kind of love that changes everything. She stepped down from the podium to applause, but she only had eyes for Ryan. He met her halfway across the room, and before she could speak, he pulled her into a quiet corner. Celeste, what are you doing? Telling the truth, publicly, unambiguously. She took a breath. I love you, Ryan Walker. I want a future with you. Messy and complicated and real. I want to wake up to your face and fall asleep in your arms and ride that blue Harley into sunrises we haven't even dreamed of yet. You're killing me here, he said roughly. Good. Because I'm terrified and I need you to be terrified too so we can be terrified together. He laughed, but it came out choked. You have no idea how much I want this. Want you. Want a future I thought I'd forfeited the right to have. Then take it. Take us. Say yes to possibility instead of punishment. Say yes to... Yes. he interrupted, kissing her hard. Yes to everything. The room erupted in applause again, this time for them, and Celeste realized she'd just made their relationship undeniably, irreversibly public. No more question about commitment or seriousness. She'd just declared her intentions to everyone who mattered. And she'd never felt freer. They spent Christmas morning together, just the two of them, in her too-big mansion that finally felt like home because he was in it. He gave her a helmet, custom painted in royal blue with silver stars, and she gave him a framed photo of them on the Harley at sunrise, a moment captured by a friend without their knowledge. "Do you remember your first love?" she asked as they sat by her fireplace wrapped in blankets and contentment. "Before your wife, before everything. What was your first love?" Ryan was quiet for a long moment. "I think it was you. That little blonde girl who wasn't afraid of my beat-up bicycle, who told me stories about where dreams lived, who made me promise to remember her even when I was too young to understand what promises meant." He looked at her with devastating tenderness. "I forgot your face and your name, Celeste, but I never forgot the feeling of being known completely by someone. Every relationship after was me trying to find that again." She was crying again. Seemed like she cried more with Ryan than she had in years, but they were good tears. Healing tears. "I think it was you too," she admitted. "That boy who shared his broken toys and made me laugh and gave me the most precious thing he owned just so I'd remember him. Every man after was measured against a memory I couldn't quite recall but couldn't ever forget." They kissed, slow and sweet, and tasted destiny on each other's lips. New Year's Eve arrived with its promise of fresh starts and new beginnings. Celeste hosted a small party. Close friends only, people who genuinely cared about them, rather than their relationship as scandal. Ryan was nervous, still not fully comfortable in her world, but she stayed close, anchoring him. At midnight, when everyone else was kissing and cheering, she pulled him out to her balcony overlooking the city. "I have something to ask you," she said, her hands trembling, "and I need you to really hear me before you answer. Celeste, I know we've only been together 6 months. I know society says I should wait longer, that we should be more certain that a billionaire heiress doesn't propose to a janitor. But here's what I also know. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. You make me better, braver, and kinder, and more myself. You've taught me that worth isn't measured in dollars or titles, but in integrity and courage and the capacity to love despite risk." She pulled a small box from her pocket, and Ryan's eyes widened. "I know you lost your wife and carry that grief still. I know you have nightmares and doubts and days when the past feels heavier than the present. I'm not asking you to forget or to stop grieving. I'm asking you to make room for new joy alongside old sorrow. I'm asking you to believe that you deserve happiness again." She opened the box, revealing a simple platinum band engraved with coordinates, the latitude and longitude of the beach where they'd shared their first kiss. "Ryan Walker, will you marry me?" The question hung in the cold night air, her breath visible in frozen clouds, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. Everything hinged on his answer, her hope, her future, her belief that love could conquer all the logical reasons why this was insane. Ryan stared at her, and she watched emotions flicker across his face. Shock, fear, longing, uncertainty. He opened his mouth, closed it, and she felt panic rise. Maybe she'd pushed too hard, asked too much, wanted something he wasn't ready to give. "I'm going to get married," she whispered, her voice shaking but determined. "I'm going to marry you, Ryan Walker, if you'll have me." The billionaire doctor is asking the janitor, and she's trembling for his yes. And there it was, the truth laid bare, her heart offered on her sleeve, everything she was and hoped to be hanging on his response. Ryan's eyes filled with tears, and when he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, God, yes, Celeste, 1,000 times yes." She slipped the ring on his finger, and he pulled her into a kiss that felt like coming home, like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place, like the answer to a question she'd been asking her entire life without knowing it. Behind them, inside her mansion, the party continued, music and laughter and champagne. But out on the balcony, under a sky full of stars and city lights, they held each other and cried and laughed and began imagining a future they'd build together, one where CEOs could love janitors, where grief could coexist with joy, where second chances were real and redemption was possible, where two people who'd been connected as children, separated by life and reunited by fate, could finally write their own ending. And it would be happy, not perfect, not without challenges, but real and honest, and full of the kind of love that changed everything. "Did any of you have an important object?" Celeste asked, looking up at Ryan with a smile, still thinking about that blue motorcycle keychain that had brought them full circle. An object that connected you to someone special, that bridged time and distance and brought you back to what mattered most. Ryan held her close and kissed her forehead. "I do now," he said, looking at the ring on his finger. "And I'm never letting it go." Neither was she. The engagement announcement made headlines exactly the way Celeste predicted it would. "Billionaire heiress proposes to hospital janitor," screamed across tabloids and social media, accompanied by photos from the New Year's party that someone had inevitably leaked. But this time, something different happened. The story that tabloids meant as scandal became something else entirely, a modern fairy tale that resonated with people tired of conventional narratives. Videos of their television interview went viral, Ryan's honesty about loss and redemption touching millions. Letters poured into the hospital from people sharing their own stories of love across class divides, of second chances after tragedy, of finding courage to defy expectations. "Look at this," Celeste said one morning, 3 weeks after the engagement, reading emails in her office while Ryan cleaned the hallway outside. He'd insisted on continuing his work until they figured out next steps together, his pride requiring that he not be seen as quitting the moment he'd secured a wealthy wife. She walked out to find him, still in his blue uniform and yellow gloves, and showed him her phone. "A woman in Ohio says your story gave her courage to pursue the mechanic she's loved for years. A widower in Seattle says watching you choose to live again helped him start dating after his wife passed. Ryan, we're inspiring people." He set down his mop and pulled her close, not caring who saw. "You're inspiring people. I'm just the guy lucky enough to be loved by you. We inspire them together," she corrected, kissing him softly. The doctor and the janitor, who found their way back to each other. The hospital board called another emergency meeting, but this time the tone was different. The chairman cleared his throat awkwardly as Celeste entered, Ryan beside her at her request. "Dr. Davenport, Mr. Walker, we owe you both an apology. The public response to your relationship has been overwhelmingly positive. Our patient satisfaction scores have increased, donations are up 30%, and we've received hundreds of applications from medical professionals who say they want to work somewhere that values humanity over hierarchy." Celeste kept her expression neutral, though she felt Ryan's hand squeeze hers under the table. "We were wrong to question your judgment," another board member added. "Your personal choices have actually strengthened this institution's reputation. We should have trusted your leadership from the beginning." "Thank you," Celeste said simply. "I appreciate your honesty, and I have a proposal for the board. Ryan has agreed to leave his janitorial position to work with our hospital foundation, using his financial expertise to help manage our endowment and charitable giving. His experience at BlackRock makes him uniquely qualified, and it addresses any lingering concerns about propriety." Ryan had initially resisted the idea, uncomfortable with what he saw as accepting a position because of their relationship, but Celeste had argued persuasively that his skills were being wasted, that he could do more good managing millions in charitable funds than cleaning floors, and that he'd earned the right to contribute meaningfully again. The board approved unanimously, and for the first time since they'd met, Ryan looked at peace with moving forward instead of punishing himself with penance. The wedding was planned for spring, a small ceremony on the beach where they'd shared their first kiss. Celeste wore a simple white dress that cost a fraction of what society expected, while Ryan wore jeans and a white shirt, his blue Harley parked nearby as their getaway vehicle. The guest list was tiny: close friends, hospital staff who'd supported them, and a few family members. Celeste's aunt cried through the entire ceremony, remembering Celeste's mother and how she'd wanted her daughter to find real love. Ryan's sister, who'd flown in from across the country, whispered that she'd never seen her brother look so genuinely happy since before the accident. The officiant kept it simple. "We're here to witness two people who found their way back to each other across time, distance, and tragedy. Their love story reminds us that sometimes the most unlikely connections are the most profound, that second chances are real, and that courage means choosing to live and love fully despite knowing life offers no guarantees." When it came time for vows, Celeste spoke first, her voice steady despite tears. "Ryan, you taught me that worth isn't measured in wealth or status but in integrity, and the courage to be yourself. You showed me what it means to live honestly, to grieve deeply while still choosing joy, to value what truly matters. I promise to honor your past while building our future, to support your growth while growing beside you, to love you on easy days and impossible ones. You are my first love, my second chance, and my forever choice." Ryan's voice was rough with emotion when he spoke. "Celeste, I thought I'd forfeited my right to happiness. You showed me that punishment isn't the same as penance, that living fully honors those we've lost more than dying slowly. You saw past my defenses to the man I was afraid to be again, someone who loves deeply, hopes boldly, and believes in tomorrow. I promise to stand beside you through every challenge, to support your dreams while pursuing mine, to choose us every day even when it's hard. You saved my life without even trying, just by seeing me. I'll spend the rest of mine making sure you feel seen too. They exchanged rings, matching platinum bands with those beach coordinates engraved inside. And when the officiant pronounced them married, Ryan kissed his wife like a man who'd finally come home. The reception was held at a beachfront restaurant, casual and full of laughter. No formal speeches or elaborate traditions, just good food, better company, and the kind of joy that comes from authentic celebration. As the sun set, painting the sky in oranges and pinks that matched their first motorcycle ride together, Ryan pulled Celeste away from the party. They walked to where his Harley waited, and he handed her the custom blue helmet she'd gotten for Christmas. "Ready to start our adventure?" he asked. "With you? Always." They rode along the coast as stars emerged, the ocean singing beside them, and Celeste thought about how far they'd both come. From childhood neighbors to separated strangers to reunited lovers to married partners, their journey had been anything but conventional. But conventional had never been their style. 6 months into marriage, they settled into a rhythm that worked for them. Celeste continued running the hospital with passion and excellence, but she'd learned to delegate more, to leave work at work sometimes, to prioritize the life she was building with Ryan over the legacy she was maintaining. Ryan thrived in his new role managing the hospital foundation. His financial acumen helped their charitable giving expand significantly, funding free clinics in underserved areas, scholarships for medical students from low-income families, and research into trauma and grief support. It was meaningful work that let him use his skills while honoring what he'd learned through loss. They kept the Harley, taking weekend rides that became sacred time. Just them, the road, and the freedom they'd taught each other to embrace. Celeste learned to drive it herself, and the first time Ryan rode behind her, trusting her completely, he said it felt like flying. They moved into a smaller home together, something between her mansion and his modest apartment, a place that was theirs rather than hers or his. They filled it with a strange mix of expensive art and motorcycle parts, medical journals and philosophy books, her designer clothes and his worn leather jacket, and slowly, carefully, they began talking about the future beyond just the two of them. "I'm not ready yet," Ryan admitted one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her stomach in a gesture that spoke of hopes not yet voiced. "But I think someday, maybe I could be ready to be a father again, not to replace what I lost. Nothing could, but to honor it by trying again, by believing that love is worth the risk even when you know how badly it can hurt." Celeste kissed him softly. "We have time. We have all the time we need to figure out what comes next. There's no rush, no pressure, just us, building something real at whatever pace feels right." "How did I get so lucky?" he whispered. "Luck had nothing to do with it. We found each other because we were both brave enough to be broken and honest and real. The universe rewards that kind of courage." On their first anniversary, they returned to the beach where everything had changed, where Ryan had first kissed her, where they'd gotten married, where they'd started believing in second chances. They brought the motorcycle keychain that had connected them across decades, now mounted in a small frame with a photo of them as children, smiling at a camera neither remembered, but which Ryan's sister had found in old family albums. "That little boy who gave me this," Celeste said, holding the frame. "He saved my life decades before he knew I needed saving. He taught 4-year-old me that some connections transcend logic, that promises matter even when you're too young to understand them, that love means giving someone your most precious thing just so they'll remember you. And that little girl taught me that being known completely is the most valuable thing in the world," Ryan added. "That real friendship, real love, real connection is worth any sacrifice. I forgot your face, Celeste, but I spent my whole life trying to find that feeling again." They sat on the sand as waves crashed and the sun painted the sky. Two people who'd been broken and rebuilt, lost and found, separated and reunited. "Do you think your daughter would approve?" Celeste asked softly. It was the first time she'd directly asked about his late child's potential opinion, and she held her breath, unsure if she'd overstepped. But Ryan smiled, tears sliding down his weathered face. "I think she'd love you. She always wanted me to be happy, even at 7 years old. She used to tell me to stop working so much to come play, to remember that love was more important than money." He looked at Celeste with such tenderness it made her chest ache. "You make me remember that, every single day." So yeah, I think she'd approve. I think she'd be glad I found my way back to living instead of just surviving. Celeste leaned against him and they watched the ocean together, two souls who'd found their way home. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was real, complicated, beautiful, and true. It was about second chances and childhood connections and the courage to love despite loss. It was about a billionaire doctor who proposed to a janitor and trembled for his yes, and about a man who'd lost everything learning that he still deserved happiness. It was about finding the person who'd been meant for you all along, even when life tried its hardest to keep you apart, and it was just beginning.